Now we'll take a closer look at the specifics of Obama's agenda for his meetings in Japan, South Korea, the Philippines and Malaysia. Foreign policy experts say trade, strained relations between Japan and South Korea and military ties with Philippines will be high on the agenda. The US president will also try to foster a closer alliance with Malaysia in what will be his first official visit by the US to a nation in half a century. To discuss these initiatives, I'm joined by Stephen Yates, a former Deputy Assistant to the US Vice President Dick Cheney for National Security Affairs, and Wang Yiwei, who is a professor at the School of International Studies at the Renmin University of China. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Professor Wang, let me start with you. What are the expectations from these four countries from this visit by President Obama?
I think the four Asian nations, they expect from Obama to reassurance the Americans' promise to protect them. Given that the two of them, the Philippines, Japan, have the territory dispute with China, and because of the Ukraine crisis and the rise of China, so they're very worried about the U.S. whether pivot back to Asia can be sustainable.
Stephen Yates, when Professor Wang says that they expect protection from the United States, it implies that someone is threatening them. There's a military threat. Is there a threat?
Well, there's certainly been the perception of encroachment by China in terms of territorial claims. There's the dispute over the Senkaku Diaoyutai Islands. There's also the notion of the air defense identification zone. There's actually been the reclamation of control over some of the islands off of the Philippines. And then there's the dispute in 2010 about Secretary Clinton's remarks with regard to ASEAN and territorial claims in South China Sea. So there has been at least the perception, if not the reality, that China is seeking to reassert a bit more control in its near abroad.
Professor Wang, we're not expecting, of course, to see any kind of formal treaties come out of this visit by President Obama to Asia, but will we see any kind of agreements being signed?
No, I think they want to tighten the bilateral airlines, but maybe not a new treaty, but some reassurance or promise or confirm. I think that Japan and the Philippines would like to take the use of the American support to want to change the balance of between them with China towards the more in favor of the airlines.
So when you say to tip the balance more in favor of the relationship between, say, the Philippines and the United States, what can we expect to see in concrete terms?
Well, because they have the dispute with China, and also they're very worried about China changing the status quo. So they need more support from the U.S. Tactically or militarily or even diplomatically.
Stephen Yates, is this visit by the president going to be seen as something that is a lot more symbolic than a visit that's going to have a lot of substance?
My sense is that it's going to have more symbolism. It's very difficult in current times for the president to roll out very much substance. The major piece of his agenda in Asia that they want to highlight with the trip is the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership. But there's questions about how much political capital the president has invested at home here in the United States and on Capitol Hill to get approval there. So we're really asking our allies to step far out, taking their own political risk before we're really willing to do it at home. So I don't think there'll be any major closure of agreements in that regard during the trip.
Well, let me ask Professor Wang about that agreement, the TPP as it's known, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Professor Wang, these negotiations have been going on for years. There have been a number of sessions, yet there's been a lot of back and forth, but especially between Japan and the United States over agreement on the TPP, and now it's come down actually to a squabble over beef. So will we see some kind of maybe symbolic agreement coming out of Japan and the United States during this visit?
Yes, I think the U.S. very need the Japanese promise, especially from the agricultural field, that they will continue the TPP and then give up to make the TPP moving forward. Because it is a very Obama's high agenda. Not only TPP, but also TTIP, the U.S. want to set a high standard of the globalization to resume the leadership. Given that today China be 128 trade countries, the #1 trade partner, especially in Asia Pacific. So that totally changed the position that in the Cold War era, the U.S. have the so-called the hub-spoken system. They have the airlines in this area, so they open the market to the U.S. and the U.S. Protect them. But now they more open the market to China. So this is damage the U.S. influence. This, I think the TPP in the long term want to resume the Americans' leadership, not only in military but also economically.
Stephen Yates, I guess the president will be talking with Japan about the TPP, but the big elephant in the room is going to be China, isn't it?
Always is, of course, and
Yes,
that's appropriately so. China is the major power in the region, and so when we're engaging with our allies, there'll be security concerns ranging from territory to energy to cybersecurity, any number of things that would be relevant on the agenda. And of course, there's North Korea nearby, and trying to come up with a sustainable approach to containing the threat that comes from North Korea is always high on the agenda, and dealing with China looms large on how to come up with a successful strategy there.